Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And if you would like to keep up to date with all things Clown Decade, please do drop a subscribe and of course become a member. Both buttons are available down below. As for today's video, it's going to be another three-parter on me covering Tom Nicholas, because he is effectively I suspect a paid regime shill. Whether he's paid or not is quite hard to tell, though there is a common denominator with the types that go over to Nebula, that they ended up on the whole progressive justice train or whatever it was called. I can't remember what it was, but effectively it was an American network where people were effectively paid to shill leftist politics. Is this happening on the left in Britain as well? When it comes to people like Thomas Nicholas, it's harder to tell. However, Charlotte Gill has certainly been putting together the network of left-wingers such as Dale Vince with Politics Joe, and it just makes these videos worth going through. So Thomas Nicholas has a video called How the Far Right Took Over Britain. It's a documentary apparently, it's an hour long, and because it's an hour long, I'm going to be splitting it into three parts, and we will be covering part 1 and 2 about the rise of Nigel Farage, who is apparently the far right in Britain. It's not the far right in Britain, by the way, and Tom would absolutely lose his mind over what the far right is actually like. Anyway, that's enough for an introduction, let's get to it.
Let me tell you a story.
I joined the Conservative Party when I was 13 or 14 years old. I was excited by much of what Mrs. Thatcher was trying to do during the 1980s. I felt that I was always going to be a Conservative.
Oh yes, this is a video all about Nigel Farage, the boogeyman of leftists, their most hated lightning rod. The reason, by the way, that we have any sort of right-wing momentum in Britain at all. Because let's face it, there's barely anyone else who holds a candle to the way Nigel Farage campaigns, and the way he has battled for especially Eurosceptic politics, but also right-wing politics in general. And you know what, listening to this, it's no wonder he's one of my favourite politicians. I too liked an awful lot of what Maggie Thatcher did, and when it turns out that the Tory party were going to pivot away from her, I can understand why UKIP was created.
Nigel isn't a member of the Conservative Party. Not anymore.
He's quit and set up his own party, the UK Independence Party. This party is small and doesn't have much in the way of money.
Knowing where this story goes is actually quite humble beginnings. And it is quite amazing seeing how simple the whole thing is. They don't even have the pound sterling symbol as part of their icon. It is quite literally just a simple star. It's quite amazing to see where he's come from there, really.
But its goal is simple: to pull the UK out of the European Union.
Oh yes, it was very much a continuation of Enoch Powell's politics within the Tory party. Obviously, he got kicked out of the damn party by Ted Heath because of the whole Rivers of Blood speech, or the Birmingham speech as we know it on this channel. Because Mr. Powell was an incredibly forthright politician and could see the issue with the European project quite early. And in fact, it was around this point that Nigel Farage was asking Mr. Powell for an endorsement, and obviously because he's not that clairvoyant, he obviously didn't give the go-ahead to endorse the party, because basically he didn't want the Conservative Party to die, because he was a born and bred Tory, as I'm sure this video will go into. Nigel Farage basically is too, but saw the direction they were going quite early as it turns out, and well, look where he is now, killing the damn thing.
Nigel is from good stock. His dad was a stockbroker and, despite being an alcoholic, was good enough at his job to pay for Nigel to go to Dulwich College.
What a weird thing to throw in there. His dad's an alcoholic, by the way, did you know that? Well, one, I'm not surprised, most stockbrokers are, and two, most stockbrokers are still quite good at their job while also drinking every night. It's a high-stress job. If they weren't drinking, they'd be doing cocaine.
An elite fee-paying boarding school. From there, he'd graduated straight into the family profession as a commodities trader in the City of London.
Alright, good for him. I mean, the point of all this is to basically give you... What's the only thing he's got to say about Nigel Farage so far? He went to a boarding school, privately educated snob, and then decided to go into stockbroker and was basically a nepo baby. Okay, that kind of all falls by the wayside after he's had a successful nearly 30 years in politics, though, doesn't it? Literally the most successful politician ever. Maybe not necessarily ever, but certainly post-Thatcher.
Nigel has always had right-wing sensibilities.
A teacher at his school once suggested that views she described as fascist might be enough to bar him from becoming a prefect.
Incredible. I find it shocking that a man who joined the Tory party at the age of 13 has right-wing views. That's astonished me. And one teacher said he has fascist views. What were they exactly? I need to know, because even back in the 80s, especially under Margaret Thatcher, there were plenty of people saying she was fascist, and she was anything but. Fascists absolutely hate Thatcher.
And yet, for now, that doesn't matter.
Well, then why'd you bring any of that up? I know why you brought up. You brought up to smear him, that was it. Oh, he's rich and a snob, and a nepo baby with no skills. Oh, also, a teacher called him fascist. Great.
His disagreement with the largely pro-Europe establishment is a fairly technocratic one.
His party is also, for all intents and purposes, completely irrelevant.
Oh yeah, it was all about British sovereignty, which again was Enoch Powell's large problem with the EEC as it was known at the time, because he could tell that the project was going to move to a European superstate, which it pretty much did. And then the second point, it's an irrelevant party. Yeah, that's kind of true of every right-wing splinter group, until it's not. And what was quite interesting about UKIP is that actually, effectively what it was a party of disgruntled Eurosceptic Tories. It was effectively another wing of the Tory party that hated the Eurocrats, which obviously differentiated it from other splinter groups like National Front or the BNP, because they weren't openly fascist. In fact, they really didn't like fascists to the point that they kicked them out.
If you live in Britain in the late 1990s, chances are that you know someone who's a member of UKIP, and chances are that person is a bit of an oddball.
Well, I wouldn't know. I was ages of 1 to 4 at the time. And yes, it was certainly a party for Europe obsessives. Those will not have been normal people in the 20th century. It was only really at the Brexit debate where being sceptical of Europe really started to be seen as somewhat normal, to the point it actually won. It actually won, let's not forget. Who's that thanks to? A lot of people, but largely Nigel Farage as well, given that UKIP forced the vote in the first place.
When the election comes later that year, UKIP stands in 194 seats across the country and loses in every single one.
Nigel himself is the only UKIP candidate who manages to clear 5% of the vote.
Oh yeah, people from back in the UKIP days talk about how they used to pop corks if they managed to make the deposit back. The point was never to win. That's not the point here. That's not the point of a protest/pressure party. The point is to siphon votes off the Tories, threaten Labour to come in, and so what the Tories need to do to get their votes back, effectively, come to a compromise at the very least. That's what happened with the Brexit Party in 2019 with Boris Johnson. They won't be making that mistake again, and they won't have to given the current polling.
He's forced to watch from the sidelines of the sidelines of the sidelines as the election is won by Tony Blair, a leader who believes firmly that Britain's future is very much in Europe.
Yeah, and it was one of the worst mistakes that Britain ever made, unfortunately. There's lots of places to pinpoint where things started to go wrong, and it really was Tony Blair's second term, which is effectively when Britain turned into a housing market with an NHS attached. Almost everything left-wingers complained about Margaret Thatcher for was actually done under Tony Blair. Selling off state assets to foreigners, that was done by Tony Blair. Margaret Thatcher still had a golden share of utility companies owned by the government. I could go on a tangent about that list, but I don't particularly want to. And this whole thing of Nigel Farage was, this very little man in politics. Well, yeah, the point of UKIP was to put pressure on the Tories. Back in the late 90s, yeah, they weren't very big because it was their first election. Let's see where it led to.
Nigel is, to put it simply, a political weirdo.
A child of the establishment who's chosen to stand out in the cold.
I suppose that's not a particularly unfair way to put it. He certainly would have, in the good old days, had a straight shot at becoming a Tory politician if that's what he wanted. And the funny thing is that, yeah, pretty much everyone who makes complete radical changes in politics are weirdos at some point. They kind of have to be. The point of having a radical change in politics is that you are outside of the establishment, which, effectively being a traitor to the establishment, which, yes, Nigel Farage is, does make him a bit of a weirdo. Fair enough, it's not a bad thing. Though it is interesting that this supposed leftist is effectively saying being a weirdo to the establishment is somewhat wrong. I want you to notice that.
He's clearly passionate about his anti-Europe stance, but that stance is precisely what makes him irrelevant. The idea that he might one day reshape British politics is a fantasy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Nobody was expecting this in the late 90s. Again, this is why Enoch Powell, or part of the reason Enoch Powell didn't endorse UKIP back then, because who could have predicted this? No one.
Now let me show you a different video.
We pride ourselves on having a legal system which is the best in the world, and we pride ourselves on the fact that we've all got free speech.
Oh, the irony of Keir Starmer saying that. Sorry, are we going to try and say that Starmer broke Britain here? Starmer's kind of a non-entity in the whole story. Britain's been broken for quite some time. Not even Liz Truss broke the economy. It's been broken since the Blair days, and it just never recovered under the Tories. You can blame austerity for that. Austerity wasn't really the problem there. The problem was that absolutely no one got productivity up again. It's going up a bit in the private sector. Public sector, it's been pretty much stagnant since 2008.
This is a clip from the critically acclaimed documentary Gláeddyv. It follows two activists who are locked in a £10 million legal battle with fast food chain McDonald's.
Long story short, some couple was in a legal dispute with McDonald's, and obviously a lot of people are on the side of not McDonald's because we love a good underdog story.
One of those lawyers is a rising human rights barrister called Keir Starmer.
I immediately saw that McDonald's had a very strong legal team and that it was a complicated case raising all sorts of issues. And as soon as I saw the imbalance, I decided that I would do what I could to help them.
The funny thing there being is that quite a big defence of Keir Starmer in terms of the people he defended is that, oh, well, you've got the cab rank rule in which, you know, first come, first serve. You go to the lawyer at the front of the queue to represent you. And obviously here's Keir Starmer admitting, actually, I pick and choose my battles. So it kind of undermines that whole defence when it comes to people he has defended, and obviously with other lawyers too. Anyway, bit of an aside.
Here is the perfect personification of the Britain that Tony Blair's new government wants to build.
Okay, bit of a weird one.
He's from, at best, a lower middle class background. His father, a toolmaker, his mum, a nurse in the NHS.
Oh, he's fallen for it. This is the thing with Tom Nicholas. He always gives the perception that he does his research. He doesn't. Keir Starmer's father owned a tool-making factory. He wasn't a tool... Well, he was a tool maker insofar as he owned the means of production for it. But again, this is exactly the type of thing I expect from socialists. When I own the means of production, it's fine, because, trust me, it's for the workers. I'm a trade unionist, don't you know? But yeah, Guido managed to find this niche barn theatre news back in 2014, where it turns out that Rod Starmer, Keir's father, actually owned a factory. And so wasn't from a lower middle class background. If you own a tool factory, you are at the very least middle class, more than likely upper middle class. Especially if you live in Surrey.
When he studies for his law degrees at Leeds and then Oxford, it's as the first in his family to go to university.
Yeah, I mean, he will have been. Going to university took a massive uptick in the 90s and beyond. Hell, neither of my parents went to university and my brother did, and that's mainly because Blair wanted everyone to go to university.
He seems like an embodiment of meritocracy, living proof that through hard work and formal education, anyone can rise to the top.
Well, I mean, kind of. It's not exactly from a working class background raising your way to the top. I mean, his dad's high up in the trade unions and on top of that owns a factory. It's not exactly rags to riches, but yeah, he didn't go to a private school. He went to a grammar school, I believe. Not to take away from the actual achievements that Keir Starmer has had, but the whole thing of pushing this story of, oh, he was a nobody and rose up in the ranks, it's not quite true, given the truth about his father's background. But yeah, sure, it's less of a silver spoon in the mouth than Nigel Farage, I'll give you that.
Keir also has his principles. The Gláeddyv case is a testament to that.
There is, after all, little to be gained from his involvement with the trial.
Well, that's not true. It got him a higher profile. He literally made it into a documentary. This is really strange. Tom Nicholas is supposed to be not quite a bread trooper, but he seems to be really on the side of defending Keir Starmer to the hilt, with really easily undermined arguments.
He's not even being paid. He's there solely in order to defend the principle that gargantuan, multinational corporations shouldn't be able to use the law to silence their critics.
Credit where it's due? Yeah, good. That is a good thing, I do agree.
Keir's politics might be a bit to the left, but he's exactly the kind of person whom we're led to believe should become Prime Minister.
Well, maybe if you're a mad lefty, yeah, they just want any working class person up there. The amount of people I know that want Angela Rayner as Prime Minister is crazy to me. I mean, she became Shadow Education Secretary and left school at 16. That still doesn't make sense to me. I'm more on the Farage side of things. I'd prefer to have people with experience in these areas of government rather than necessarily who's the most popular with everyone. Hell, I still remember the BBC interviewing a load of people and they were asked who they'd like as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Guess who they chose?
I would say Martin Lewis.
Martin Lewis.
Oh, yeah. Martin Lewis.
Martin.
Oh, yeah. I would like Martin Lewis.
The reason the money-saving expert would be a poor choice, by the way, is because all he really exists to do is maximise the amount of benefits you can get off the government, but he is not the man to run a country or the economy. That is not where his expertise are, and having a lawyer run the country, how's that going? Didn't go well with Blair, not really going well now, is it?
He's very much not a child of the establishment.
Sorry, but his dad being a trade unionist and being an activist in the Labour Party, don't know about that. It's even rumoured he's literally called Keir to be named after the first Labour leader who was called Keir Hardie. I don't know why leftists are always so against the idea that unions are part of the establishment. Of course they are. They literally exist as an arm of the Labour Party, who've been in power a third of the time over the past century.
But he's managed to fight his way into it, and who knows where that could lead.
So I just did not expect a puff piece for Keir Starmer from a leftist. This is crazy. This can't be popular with his base. I suppose it is in terms of at least he's better than Farage, which is how this is framed.
Nigel and Keir are then polar opposites.
Opposites, for now at least, in politics.
Oh, is this where you're going to go? Are you going to say that Nigel Farage's success has meant that Keir has had to move right? Unbelievable. I mean, honestly, a human rights lawyer and socialist to Tom here is being a bit to the left in politics. This is where their mindset is. You know, the centre in politics is actually probably just to the left of me. But the problem with breadtubers is that they're in a complete echo chamber, and because they're all communists, if you have someone who is in a profession who isn't necessarily all about politics, then yeah, they're going to seem like a centrist to you, which they're not, and Keir still isn't. We still live in the highest tax, highest spend era post-war. And that's only getting worse, by the way. That does not make a right-winger or even a centrist. That makes a full-on socialist.
One is about to find himself a persistent winner, securing every promotion, every goal, every election he chooses to go for. The other is going to be a laughingstock, a national punching bag.
Well, they're not laughing anymore, are they? Literally every angle of the establishment is in complete panic mode and are having to basically dropkick themselves to the right to effectively stay relevant. The left wing, frankly, are dead in this country. Even the Corbyn party is being talked about more in terms of, God, how big are they going to make the Nigel Farage win then, rather than, wow, that's going to get somewhere, isn't it? Because believe it or not, coming out here and saying, yes, we need even higher taxes, as much as polling states that, yes, people want higher taxes, it's total nonsense. Of course people don't, especially since they can see how much of it is wasted.
Together, these men are going to break British politics.
Sorry, it's just absolutely crazy to me to even have Keir Starmer anywhere near the man you blame for breaking British politics. What's he done since getting in? Move slightly right because the left is dead, and Reform are stealing all the votes. Keir Starmer's kind of a non-entity at this point, which is really weird to say about the Prime Minister. His best moves so far have pretty much all been geopolitical, but then also his worst move so far has been geopolitical with the Chagos Islands. I mean, honestly, do you expect me to believe a centrist would give away Chagos and pay $35 billion to Mauritius to give away our sovereign territory? Of course not, but this guy's a communist and doesn't believe in borders. Anyway, as you can see, there are 6 chapters in this video. For this particular reaction, we are going to be doing the first 2, Life's a Riot and Rising Stars, with the subsequent videos covering the next 2 chapters and then the 2 chapters after. Anyway, let's get into Life's a Riot, which I can only imagine is a lead-up to talking about the 2011 riots, because I can't think of any other riots that happened post-2008 to 2010.
If you vote for me, and if we topple the Speaker, we will send an earthquake
through British politics that will tell them that we're not happy with being ignored.
Quite a green tactic from UKIP back in the day then, but I suppose that's what you're going to do when you are a small party, effectively trying to put pressure on the establishment. Because typically the other parties do not stand against the Speaker, because technically the Speaker is not supposed to be part of any party and is effectively there as the referee of Parliament, and well, someone has to do it, and it's always someone from one of the main two parties. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes after the next election.
Breaking this convention is newsworthy, and so Nigel's decision to sign up as a candidate in the seat is primarily a stunt.
Yeah, the Green Party do it these days as well. That's why it's not in the news really anymore, because the Green Party always try something silly like this anyway.
Nigel has become quite fond of stunts.
13 years and 3 days since UKIP's drubbing in the 97 election, and things are looking up for the new party.
It's the thing I'm finding so funny about this push from Tom to try and effectively say, oh, UKIP were useless back in 97. Yeah, the party was at most 6 years old. Takes quite a while for these parties to get established, which they did. I get he's telling a story, but in the context of where Nigel Farage has got now, it just seems a bit petty.
Well, as up as they could. They even had an MP for a bit.
That MP might have been a Conservative MP who defected rather than someone who was actually elected as a UKIPper. He might have been a slightly dodgy character who was later convicted of election fraud. And he might have quit the party again 7 months later.
Yeah, Bob Spink just seemed like a bit of a madman. He quit the Tory party because of criminal and other irregularities in his constituency that I assume he was involved with, or at least suspected to be involved with. And so he joined UKIP, because obviously UKIP were quite desperate to have any representation in Parliament. And then he quit UKIP because he didn't agree with them on whether a suspect should be able to be detained for 42 days or 28 days. I don't really know which side is which there, but ultimately, if that's what you quit the party over, yeah, you're just a bit mad. And then the election fraud thing was in, like, 2018, literally 10 years later. So he was literally in UKIP for about a month. Which, compare that to the problems that Reform have these days. I mean, honestly, Reform look incredibly professional.
Better still, Nigel and 10 of his UKIP colleagues have managed to bag seats in the European Parliament, which might seem a little ironic. 11 of the biggest haters of the European Union in the country now have to spend a good chunk of the year commuting back and forth between Brussels and Strasbourg.
Yeah, I suppose that is a bit ironic, but at the end of the day, if you are Eurosceptic and you want your voice heard in the European Parliament, where the hell are you supposed to go? Yeah, you're supposed to get into the European Parliament.
A month before he challenges Burkow in the election, he makes the first of several appearances on BBC panel show Have I Got News For You?
Nigel is clearly aware of the importance of being an evergreen presence on TV.
Well, yeah, that's part and parcel of being an effective campaigner.
Over the past 2 years, he's been a panellist on the BBC's Question Time no fewer than 6 times.
And the amount leftists go on about it is absolutely crazy. Going on average about twice a year is not out of the ordinary for the leader of a splinter party that has 10 MEPs and is siphoning votes off the Tories, putting them in a bit of trouble.
His first foray into reality TV is a mixed bag. He spends the half-hour show being the unrelenting butt of the joke.
I was going to say I thought he'd done very well, but I'd hate to agree with you. OK, what are UKIP's 5 pledges?
Straight talking. Straight talking. That's what you get.
That's 2, yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely the butt of the joke, but he's laughing along with it, and you can say, oh, this is him coping and trying to hide the pain, but no, I think Nigel Farage just has a good sense of humour. And ultimately, your ego is going to be fed to effectively be brought onto establishment television to effectively, well, have a show trial, for lack of a better term. He's going to feel great about that.
Nothing could be worse than election day, though.
The day begins with narrowly averted tragedy, when one final election day stunt ends in a plane crash.
Yeah, he's really lucky to be alive, and a lot of people actually found out in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here that actually he still has to do daily exercises to, well, keep on top of his injuries from that, even 15 years later.
The day ends in farce, as Nigel not only gets fewer votes than John Burkow, but also John Stevens, a ludicrously posh candidate who was followed around town by a mascot called Flipper the Dolphin.
Well, it was in Buckingham, and their MP, well, Speaker of the House, was John Burkow. I think they just like posh people there. But on top of that, again, you know, this was 2010, this was largely when Euroscepticism was getting a bit more mainstream post-Blair, and plus just after the financial crash and Gordon Brown sold off our gold, of course people were going to be voting Tory to keep Labour out. We're not in the same political landscape as we are today, where quite clearly trying to put down a man who effectively is running a protest party at this point is now looking to be the next Prime Minister. Look how bad Nigel Farage is. They only have to get him on Have I Got News For You to try and make fun of him. And he's only being talked about absolutely everywhere because he still managed to get 15% of the vote against the Speaker. The Greens didn't even manage that last election.
Nigel has made progress.
UKIP manages a full 3.1% of the national vote. Scepticism towards the UK's membership of the European Union is on the rise.
Well, to be fair, the BNP was also a Eurosceptic party that a lot of people were voting for before UKIP came along, but Nick Griffin absolutely ruined that by going on Question Time. The difference is Nigel Farage didn't.
But they still failed to gain a single seat in Parliament.
However hard he tries, Nigel's dogged commitment to this single political issue means that he's resigned to being little more than a political punchline.
Which is a really funny thing to say because, again, 6 years later, we ended up with a vote on the European Union. In fact, they forced the Tories in the next manifesto to promise a referendum.
It's 4 months earlier, and Keir Starmer is standing in the reception of the Crown Prosecution Service's head office in London.
He's there to announce that the state will be bringing criminal charges against 4 members of Parliament who have been found to have fiddled their expenses.
Yep, fine, get them, lock them up, I don't want my tax money being wasted.
And, just as with McLibel, Keir has emerged as the adult who is here to sort out the mess.
Are you really going down the route of adults, like sensible adults now back in Parliament? Is that the route we're going down here? Honestly, not necessarily every human rights law is terrible. I like the example so far of the McLibel case, because I don't think McDonald should have the right to try and use lawfare to silence criticism of them, and obviously expenses scandals, yes, please make sure they don't happen again. But let's be real, he defends them as a whole. And that's exactly why we've got the problem with, say, illegal migration that we have, and why prisons are basically hotels.
Just over a year previously, Keir took the decision to swap sides. He not only became a prosecutor, but stepped into the role of Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yeah, good for him, but what this effectively means is that he's quite comfortably within the establishment role, and that's probably going to naturally happen after 20 years of being a public lawyer and spending a decade or more in the CPS. It's fine, but ultimately all this means is that when he's in Parliament, he is now trying to defend that status quo, because it's literally all he knows.
The cases are almost all high profile, as is the role itself, which invites a new level of scrutiny.
The right-wing press draws on his record in human rights law to complain about the appointment of the barrister who defended terror suspects.
Which, as he admitted earlier, he can pick and choose that. Just saying.
Or, as one blogger apparently put it, a soft, liberal, human rights lefty.
Well, human rights lawyers do typically have CVs that allow them to be accused of things like that, I'm just saying.
Even one of his colleagues admits to having expected him to have been a prosecutor who was nevertheless actively anti-police.
Well, that's my point made for me.
Keir's new job does give him the opportunity to continue his pursuit of some more right-on causes.
He not only takes MPs to court for expenses fraud, but also pushes ahead to ensure that the racist murderers of 18-year-old Stephen Lawrence are finally prosecuted after 2 decades of justice being denied.
These are the less bad examples of Keir Starmer's CV.
Yet, Keir also has a clear desire to prove his critics wrong, to make any accusations that he's too radical for the task at hand hard to stick.
Well, I'm not being funny, but the history of some of his colleagues and friends, such as Lord Hermer, who went to the UN to support Mauritius in their case for the Chagos Islands against Britain, I'm not too surprised he wanted to get rid of that prejudice about human rights lawyers. I mean, sure, you've picked all the ones that I don't have much issue with, but he will obviously have been involved in plenty of others, such as, yes, defending terror suspects, which, fine, that can be a lawyer's job if they're in the tax rank rule. But as Keir Starmer said earlier, doesn't seem to be within the bounds of that cab rank rule.
And so, for reasons that some will call pragmatic and others a little bit pathetic, he begins to pivot on his principles.
Well, yeah, reality of the situation is that actually human rights laws aren't actually particularly popular if it ends up making massive issues. But even then, he's not leaving the ECHR or touching the Human Rights Act, so calm down.
This previously dedicated critic of the use of state power suddenly finds himself repeatedly defending its most extreme deployments. He backs a decision not to prosecute the police officers who shot and killed Brazilian student Jean-Charles de Menezes at Stockwell Underground Station.
To be fair, from what I've read into that case, that was a huge mistake on the police's part. But yeah, on the pragmatic side of things, if you end up in a situation where firearms officers aren't going to do their job because of things like that, what do you do?
He also declines to prosecute a police officer who knocked a newspaper seller, Ian Tomlinson, to the ground during a series of protests in London, despite that knock having led to Ian's death.
What? Did I hear that right? Why would they prosecute a police officer who knocked down a newspaper seller if that didn't lead to the newspaper seller's death? Why do you need to prosecute for that? What do you mean? Oh, I just listened to it again. Despite that knock having led to his death, right? I understand now. The thing is, the officer did actually go to trial and was prosecuted for manslaughter, but was found not guilty. And following a civil proceedings after anyway, the Met Police paid Tomlinson's family a sum of money for the death, and the police officer is not a police officer anymore. That doesn't seem like an unreasonable outcome to me personally. But sure, that's going against Starmer's principles.
The biggest departure from what once seemed like ironclad principles, however, is his response to the London riots.
What, because all the people rioting caused, what, like 5 deaths and hundreds of injuries and untold amounts of property damage? Are you about to complain because Keir Starmer actually opened the courts for 24 hours to get all these people prosecuted? Is that what you're about to complain about? Because that's actually quite a base thing for him to do, to be quite honest.
As Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir suddenly has a lot of people to prosecute. And so he approves a plan for courts to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to deal with the surging cases.
Oh good, that's very sensible. We can't let riots go amok like that. Are you crazy?
The riots end on the 10th of August, and by the 12th, 686 people have already had their trials and been found guilty.
Damn, crazy. If they were rioting, good. That is what I'd like to see. I wonder if this is a bit like the more recent riots last summer, where an awful lot of people just pled guilty, whether it's by pressure or advice that would make things go quicker. Because I'm going to be honest with you, if that is your complaint here, you have to complain about that when he's Prime Minister as well, but, well, I guess we'll have to wait till the final 2 chapters for that.
Defence lawyers brought in to provide support for the accused will later describe the proceedings as kangaroo courts, which had little chance of dispensing anything approaching real justice.
Well, yes, I'm sure many defence lawyers would say that. Is that actually the case? I don't know. I'm not just trusting the word of defence lawyers, though.
Children as young as 13 are being tried in the middle of the night.
You're tried as an adult from age 10 in Britain, I don't care.
A 23-year-old student who has never before been in trouble and has stolen no more than £3.50's worth of bottled water in a moment of absolute madness ends up being locked up for 6 months.
Damn, crazy. Are you going to complain about the same thing about the summer riots of last year? Are you going to complain about that? Or was that good? Was that one of the good riots? Was that one of the good ways to dispense justice against riots, sorry?
The whole affair is a brutal carnival of the power of the state.
Damn, I can't believe that they went hard on law and order after major riots all over the country like that. Crazy. Am I defending it? Kinda. If you have total loss of civility like that over, let's bear in mind, a criminal being shot for having a firearm on his person. Sorry, Americans, but that's the law here. Yeah. I kind of see the justification in fast-tracking all of these court cases, because obviously you can't let that happen again. Now, is it harsh on that 23-year-old student? Possibly, but I tell you what didn't happen after that. Another riot.
When Keir had first taken the job as DPP, the charge of his critics had been that he might change the role, that he might turn the Crown Prosecution Service soft. But by the time his term comes to end in 2013, there's a sense that it's the role which has changed him.
Yeah, Keir Starmer's a human rights lawyer and he thinks human rights are the pinnacle of what matters. That's why he made the CPS, which enforces human rights laws, to have more power. This is just the system working. Now, did he have that thought process before? I don't know. There's nothing really that goes against it. Fighting McDonald's is still putting the human rights laws above that of the corporation, which I would expect from Sir Keir Starmer.
Which might seem like an insult, But the deeper he worms his way into the establishment, the more that flexibility comes to be viewed as an asset.
Cool, yeah, sure. Honestly, don't really blame Keir Starmer for doing what he did after the London riots, and really, if he did that before, it's kind of no wonder he did it again after the summer riots. Because at the end of the day, I can quite understand why the justice system would play hardball when it comes to riots. Anyway, Chapter 2 and Rising Stars. This is obviously in the lead up to the 2016 referendum.
It's the night of May 7th, 2015, and they're counting votes in Margate Winter Gardens. It's the 7th time that Nigel has tried to gain a seat as an MP, and he's decided to stake his career on it.
Yep, he certainly perseveres. No doubt whatsoever about that. He's perfectly happy being an MEP for now, obviously, while he also tries to get into Parliament and actually cause real disruption where it matters. And again, they will have been popping champagne corks for all those previous elections because he will have got his deposit back.
He's promised his fellow UKIP members that, should he lose, he'll quit as party leader.
Oh yeah, spoiler alert, the resignation doesn't last long because, like Reform is pretty much the Nigel Farage party now, UKIP was very much the Nigel Farage party back then. People really liked him as leader.
The difference this time around is that it's Nigel himself who is the draw for these candidates wanting to stand in this particular constituency.
It's seen as a fun bit to try and pour water on his big moment by lampooning him and the entire process.
Yeah, it's amazing how hated the man is. Really. People are literally so rattled by him they are willing to spend literally hundreds just to be in the same room as him when he doesn't win an election, to try and make fun of him. That is genuinely hilarious.
He might still be a joke to many, but the fact that he's a popular joke is at least progress.
The belief that he might win the seat is an entirely reasonable one. Over the past couple of years, all his stunts and TV appearances have begun to pay off.
Well, they would. He's charismatic and a lot of right-wing people like him. A lot of them don't, obviously. But this is the hallmarks of a successful protest party, which is all really Nigel Farage wanted to be, until the Tory party was much more aligned to him. That seems to have been the long-term goal. It's not happened, hence we've got Reform now, but this is all pretty good. Certainly the most successful version of a protest party we've seen in Britain this side of the war.
12 months previously, his party had done something unthinkable.
They'd managed to finish the European Parliament elections of that year with a larger vote share than both the Conservatives and Labour. In the local elections held on the same day, UKIP had netted a respectable 21.6% of the vote in the wards that it contested.
Oh yeah, huge. It was huge. UKIP was big. And before then, the BNP were quite big in councils too. But yeah, UKIP was something else, really. I remember being at uni at the time, and UKIP was brought up a fair amount. Usually to be laughed at, but, you know, I was always somewhat sympathetic, I'd say.
Perhaps even more impressively, in the months since that upset, the party has even managed to gain 2 whole members of the UK Parliament.
Both are, granted, defectors from the Conservative Party, but both voluntarily submit themselves to by-elections in which their constituents enthusiastically back their changes in allegiance.
Oh yeah, Douglas Carswell. Yeah, it was big. It was good at the time. Again, if anyone was going to shake up the way British politics works in the 21st century, it was always going to be Farage in hindsight. There's just no one else with the charisma and the ability and the energy to campaign like he does. And he's just so personable.
The accepted wisdom is that the UK's 3-party system has now become a 4-party one.
See, it's amazing looking back on things like this. I completely forgot at the time that it was a coalition government between the Tories and the Lib Dems. By the way, what's part of the reason for that? UKIP contesting seats and effectively giving Labour and Lib Dems some more seats in some areas because obviously you're splitting the Tory vote. These days it's the other way round, it's the Tories splitting the Reform vote.
Nigel's more technocratic disagreements with European political integration have gradually been subsumed by a much broader anti-establishmentism and anti-immigration narrative.
Yes, those are two, especially now, very popular positions. I mean, seriously, since at least 2008, people just feel like their lives are no better. Who can you blame for nearly 2 decades of that, other than the establishment, who are mainly the Tories and partially Labour, who wanted exactly what happened, but way worse.
The country is still suffering in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, and while blame might more accurately be placed at the feet of Nigel's ex-colleagues in the City of London, he works hard to pin the blame on immigrants.
don't know about any of that, really. Firstly, the 2008 crash was massively an American issue. It just had a domino effect everywhere else, because obviously everyone's got an interest in the American market. Beyond that, I don't think it's fair to say that the 2008 crash was blamed on immigrants by Nigel Farage, but let's see what you play here.
So much of what he and his team are doing appears to be working.
Oh, he just doesn't play a clip. He literally just asserts all that. I mean, let's be real. Immigration, to the extent that we had post-Blair, well, and during Blair, was rather large and did attract quite a bit of unskilled labour, which obviously depressed lower class wages, let's say. So there's something to that, but I've never ever heard the argument that immigration caused a financial crash. I've never heard that.
And then, at the very final hurdle, Nigel's place as the outsider's outsider trips him up once more.
UKIP collects an astounding 12.6% share of the national vote, making it the third most popular party.
Oh yeah, massive. Again, this is what caused the Brexit referendum. This is why we have Brexit. This was on the road to it. It's amazing.
That support, however, is spread too thinly across the country. Nigel's 3.8 million votes converts into just one MP.
Yeah, and then they were complaining about first past the post for ages, and then obviously Reform do really well, and they don't want first past, and they do want first past the post now because it will get them 400 MPs or whatever.
And that MP is not him.
He tries to put a good face on his defeat. But there's a good reason to wonder whether his strategy of working outside the main three political parties might not have been so clever.
Yes, and then obviously he resigned, but then was brought back pretty much straight away because the members still wanted him. I think the way the NEC and UKIP put it was basically, oh yeah, the members have just rejected your letter of resignation, you have to keep working.
Back in London, and Keir Starmer is also stood on stage. It's 5 AM in the Somerstown Sports Centre, and Keir has just learned that he's to be the next Labour Member of Parliament for the constituency of Holborn and St Pancras. He's won a seat in Parliament on his very first attempt.
Wow, Keir Starmer was put in a safe seat for Labour. Colour me shocked. Anti-establishment, my guys. To be fair, he is at a point in the video where he's not even pretending that Starmer is anything other than establishment. Which, by the way, he always was.
The Labour Party's decision to gift Keir the seat also comes with a promise.
The plan is that, should the party win the next election, Keir will be made Attorney General, effectively the government's lawyer.
Let's be fair here, that makes total sense. The man got to the top of the CPS, Director of Public Prosecution for the CPS, why would he not turn out to be Attorney General? You want someone with experience there. That's not remotely a bad decision by Labour, to be honest with you. Call it corrupt if you want, but, you know, makes sense.
Yes, he would have been an elected politician rather than a bureaucrat, but he would have been the most bureaucratic version of an elected politician going.
Yeah, I'm still not really understanding the story of Keir Starmer and how he ruined Britain. I'm not going to lie here. His reaction to the 2010-2011 Tottenham riots, probably a good thing in the long term.
The safety of the seat, and Keir's being given it despite zero political track record, means democracy isn't exactly playing a starring role here.
What are you talking about, man? If St Pancras did not want to vote in someone of the Liberal elite who was promised a part of Attorney General, they would have voted someone else, wouldn't they? But they didn't. Call them NPC, Liberal elite, whatever you want, but ultimately democracy is still working here. You just don't like the result. And neither do I, by the way, but I'm not going to pretend that this isn't how our system works, nor that it wasn't ever intended to work like this.
This is that post-Blair vision of supposed meritocracy in action once more.
I mean, just ignoring the whole attack on meritocracy by trying to make out it's Blairite, which is just ridiculous. Blair's plan effectively was to keep everyone in the education system in uni until they were 21, and then God knows what after that, really. Cultural revolution to have the right's nose rubbed into diversity was another thing, by the way. Is that meritocracy? No, not really.
When it comes to it, however, the promise of the Attorney General job is never tested.
Yep, Labour lost that election despite all the polling. The UKIP protest party didn't quite do its job properly that time. In the long term, was that a good or a bad thing? Probably a good thing. We got Brexit out of it.
And, well, the expectation is that the man the Murdoch press had christened Red Ed will be replaced by someone from the party's broadly neoliberal centre-right faction. The subsequent leadership election is won, instead, by veteran left-wing agitator Jeremy Corbyn.
Okay, so first, the claim that there's anyone centre-right in the Labour Party is absolutely absurd. let's not pretend otherwise. The Tory party under David Cameron, aside from maybe you could argue the austerity programme, which all that really meant was raising taxes, spending stayed the same year on year, it's just all got siphoned to the NHS, was a centre-left party, and they do like saying that they're the heir to Blair, a centre-left politician. So yeah, as I say, let's not pretend that anyone in Labour's centre-right, and yeah, Corbyn got in, and that kind of ruined the party. They got more votes, sure, but they did not win an election still, because thankfully, we're a country that doesn't want communism.
His colleagues will spend the next 4 years in more or less open revolt, constantly briefing against him and attempting to frustrate his leadership in any way they can.
Yeah, that makes sense. They kept losing under Ed Miliband, who, you know, is only slightly to the right of Corbyn. They understand that the way to win elections is actually to appear centre-right. The problem is that pretty much everyone knows they're not centre-right, and they're finding that out again with this Labour government. And having Corbyn in, who is one, has an awful lot of baggage, and two, is an open communist, well, they didn't think it'd get them very far. And it didn't, because people are happy to vote Boris Johnson and Theresa May to keep out Jeremy Corbyn, and that actually ended up working, even if Theresa May had to do a deal with the DUP, and then obviously Boris Johnson won by a landslide.
It's a particular upset for Keir. He was expecting to walk pretty much straight into a job at the top of government. If that post-Blair vision of meritocracy were to be believed, this should have been his moment.
Oh, thank God people voted Cameron instead of Ed Miliband. God, Ed Miliband's, by the way, in charge of our energy sector at the moment, by the way, and it's got worse. Imagine if he was in charge of the whole country.
Yet, this man who has spent more than half a decade moulding himself into a creature of the establishment has found himself in a decidedly anti-establishment party.
Well, yeah, let's be fair here. Barely anyone actually expected Corbyn to succeed. I mean, really, in hindsight, all Corbyn's leadership really did was put Novara Media on the map and make a load of young people communist. Total long-term disaster. There you go, you had it, you had your chance, people don't want it. We might actually get it in 10 years when all the boomers die, that's going to be a disaster. You basically have to pray that reform win and fix the country, that's what you got to pray for here.
Jeremy's politics are all about taxing the rich and taking on vested interests. He's been a frequent opponent of many of Keir's decisions as DPP.
Yeah, to be fair to Corbyn, he is absolutely anti-establishment. But Corbyn's vision for the future is absolutely no borders whatsoever. Every refugee comes here and then, well, it's basically anarchy. Thank God he didn't win. There would be open revolt in the Labour Party if he won and actually started doing his mad stuff that he wanted. It's actually quite clear in hindsight as well, looking through the 2017 and 19 manifestos. Corbyn was probably being largely kept in line, you know, try and make it more centre-left rather than hard-left, Mr Corbyn, was probably how a lot of conversations went.
In fact, it's not just that the Labour Party is under new management, it's that entire post-Blair technocratic vision of politics, which Keir is an embodiment of, has just exploded before his very eyes.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people are voting Reform, by the way.
Suddenly, politics appears to be a domain of antagonism, not just administration.
All of which means Keir's new principles are about to be tested.
And that is the end of part 2 of Tom Nicholas. I suppose it's not the worst introduction ever to things, but I think you can see what I mean by a bread tuber. Lawyers are only good when they are representing the, well, small people versus the big corporations. As soon as you actually start doing something about rioters, that's bad. Absolutely mad perspective on things. Obviously, to get hundreds of people punished for the part they played in the riot, yeah, obviously that's going to happen. The same thing, by the way, happened with the summer riots last year, and it was very popular, up until obviously Lucy Connolly was sent to jail for something she tweeted. Obviously she shouldn't be in jail, but the people trying to burn down hotels and smashing up Greggs obviously should. It's no wonder that was so popular. It's about the only thing that Keir Starmer's done, along with dealing with certain foreign affairs, that is actually popular. It's literally everything else he's done that's made him the least popular Prime Minister ever. And yes, that is because he's establishment. He's absolutely establishment, there's no doubt about that. So not all entirely inaccurate, but there has been strange commentary here and there, but I'm sure as we get into Brexit everything's going to get much worse, but you'll have to wait on that. For now, as I say, that's everything I had for you for today, so chill time. It's just videos for now. Hopefully we'll return with Tosh Talks next Tuesday. videos out as and when I can make them. Hopefully I can get another one out today and another one out at the weekend so that I can stick to the good old 5 a week. And then it's back to regular scheduling. Right, if you enjoy what I do, do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, or you can, of course, become a member or leave a super chat or super thanks in any stream or video that I do. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.